me, I don't want to die. He's pulling me back.
He's got her again. Tilikum's pulling her under. Grab the pole, Kelty, reach for the pole.
She was just seconds away from escape, but the orcas weren't done playing. The crowd had left. The show was over, but for one young trainer, the nightmare was only beginning. She screamed, "I don't want to die," but the orcas didn't let go. This is the haunting story of Keltie Byrne, the first orca trainer ever killed in captivity. Before we dive into the full story, make sure to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. This is one story you won't forget. Keltie Byrne was just 20 years old, a bright, athletic young woman with a big smile and even bigger dreams. She grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, but her heart belonged to the ocean. That love carried her all the way to British Columbia, where she studied marine biology at the University of Victoria. Keltie wasn't just passionate about science. She believed in connection between people, between nature, and between humans and the animals we barely understand. To support her studies and to be closer to the creatures she adored, Keltie took a part-time job at Sealand of the Pacific. It was a small marine park just outside Victoria. There she worked with 3 killer whales and considered it the opportunity of a lifetime. She wasn't just a trainer, she was a dreamer. Someone who believed in the magic of marine life and never imagined the ocean could turn against her. But on February 20th, 1991, that dream shattered. By the time Keltie Byrne joined Sealand of the Pacific, 3 killer whales were already living in the cramped confines of the park's main tank. The youngest was Tilikum, a 2-year-old male captured off the coast of Iceland in 1983. Torn away from his mother and pod, he was towed behind a boat for hours, crying out, confused and terrified, as his family followed, helpless. His world changed forever the moment he was lowered into a tank, only 26 feet wide. With him were 2 older females, Haida II and Nootka IV, both captured in the wild as calves. Like Tilikum, they had been separated from their families, but they had learned how to survive captivity in a different way, by becoming dominant. The 3 were kept in a dark, enclosed pool connected by underwater gates. There was no natural light, no fresh seawater, no open space, and no escape from one another. Tilikum, still a juvenile, was often the target of bullying. Haida and Nootka rammed him, pushed him underwater, and blocked his access to food, but he had nowhere to go. In the wild, orcas swim up to 100 miles a day. In this tank, they swam in endless circles, hour after hour. The shows were repetitive. The feeding was predictable. There were no toys, no puzzles, no stimulation. As one marine biologist warned, when you keep an animal this intelligent, this social, and this powerful in a cage for years, you don't get a show animal. You get a ticking time bomb. Keltie didn't know it yet, but the orcas she loved were no longer the gentle giants she believed they were. They were traumatized, frustrated, and dangerously unpredictable. Then came February 20th, 1991, and a single slip would change everything. It was a Wednesday afternoon, February 20th, 1991. The final orca show of the day had just ended. The crowd filed out smiling, the music stopped, and the water settled. Keltie Byrne and her fellow trainers moved into their post-show routine, cleaning up, gathering equipment, prepping the coolers for the next feeding. The walkway along the east side of the pool was slick, still wet from the whale's last breach. She moved carefully, but not carefully enough. At 1:20 p.m., Keltie Byrne fell into the water, right beside 3 of the most powerful predators on Earth. The splash echoed across the enclosure. Trainers turned, eyes wide. Keltie was in the pool. She wasn't supposed to be. She surfaced fast, gasping, coughing, trying to steady herself. With one arm on the pool ledge, she kicked hard, scrambling to pull herself out. But just beneath her, something stirred. Tilikum was approaching, silent, curious, and massive. Haida and Nootka flanked him, drawn to the sudden chaos like moths to flame. In seconds, the energy shifted. What had been routine was now electric, dangerous, and Keltie was still in the water. The orcas didn't hesitate. They reacted on instinct. And from that moment on, Keltie Byrne would never leave the pool alive. Before she could hoist herself from the water, a shadow moved beneath her. In one sudden motion, he lunged. A 12,000-pound orca, jaws parting, teeth exposed. He latched onto Keltie's foot and pulled. She was dragged deep, spinning through the water like a rag doll. The cold wrapped around her. Her lungs burned. She fought. Miraculously, he let go, and Keltie broke the surface, gasping, splashing, desperate. I don't want to die, but the whales weren't done. To them, it wasn't violence. It was play. They rammed her gently at first, nudged her, pulled her down by the leg, then let her go, only to do it again. Trainers slapped the water, shouted commands, threw buckets of fish into the pool. Nothing worked. The whales had never felt anything like this before. A human in their space, struggling, gasping. They were curious, stimulated, obsessed. She was so close, but the moment she reached out, they came again. There was no blood, no signs of fury, just a brutal, endless game. That's what made it even more terrifying. It wasn't murder out of rage, it was play, from animals who no longer knew how to be wild. And as minutes passed, Keltie's strength began to fade. The trainers were doing everything they could, slapping the water, shouting commands, throwing fish into the pool, desperately trying to distract the orcas. They used every cue they had, recall signals, stationary holds, anything that might break the whale's trance. For a moment, it seemed like it might be working. Then, Keltie surfaced again. She was crying, gasping, and still fighting. A trainer threw a life ring. It spun across the surface, bouncing once, landing just inches from her hands. She touched it. She almost had it. They tossed her a rescue pole. She reached, but before she could grip it, Tilikum surged upward and dragged her back under. She was so close, so heartbreakingly close to surviving. And all the while, the whales continued to play, dragging her, dunking her, letting her go, then snatching her again. Every second felt like a lifetime, and the worst part was knowing she was still alive, still conscious, still aware. But help wasn't enough. By now, Keltie had been in the water for nearly 10 minutes. 10 minutes of pure terror. Her lungs burned. Her muscles trembled. Every gasp took more from her than it gave. She was dying in front of her coworkers, and they could do nothing. With everything she had left, Keltie made one final attempt, one last lunge toward the edge, toward life. But just before her fingers reached the ledge, and then she was gone. No more screams, no more splashing. The arena fell silent. When she finally resurfaced, her body was floating face down, limpio, lifeless. The orcas hovered near her, still nudging her gently, as if they didn't understand, as if it was still a game. It was over. Keltie Byrne was dead. She died doing what she loved, but in the arms of creatures no longer capable of understanding love. Only captivity. Attempts to recover Keltie's remains were delayed, not because of technical difficulties, but because of the whales. The trainers and emergency teams could not enter the pool safely. Tilikum, Haida, and Nootka continued interacting with her body, pulling it underwater, bringing it back up, nudging it as if she might respond. Tilikum in particular, 12,000 pounds of restrained power, refused to be separated from her. He kept her with him, always within reach, as if her presence had sparked something he could not relinquish. Observers described the behavior as eerie, almost ritualistic, but others, especially marine mammal experts, knew exactly what it was. Play behavior gone horrifyingly wrong. This wasn't rage. This wasn't calculated violence. This was stimulation, long-denied stimulation, erupting in a deadly, uncontainable form. These were animals confined to a 26-foot wide concrete pool for years. Animals whose intelligence and emotional needs far outpaced the environment they were trapped in. And now suddenly they had something new, something alive, something struggling, and now, someone dead. 2 hours later, staff used nets to finally pull Kelty's body from the water. The time was 3:35 p.m., but even as she was retrieved, the whales followed, watching, still engaged. In the immediate aftermath, the Sealand of the Pacific facility entered a tailspin. Public backlash was swift. Animal rights groups had warned of such an event for years. Former trainers had expressed concerns about the conditions, the stress levels, the overcrowding. And now the worst had happened. A young woman, with her whole life ahead of her, had died in the very waters she believed were sacred. The park closed temporarily. Investigations were launched. Experts weighed in on the causes. Some blamed poor protocols, others pointed to the whale's history. But one thing became clear. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a reckoning. Within months, Sealand of the Pacific announced it would shut down for good. The gates closed, the shows ended, the lights dimmed forever, but the story was far from over. After Sealand's closure, the 3 orcas were relocated. It was a moment some hoped would mark a new beginning. For others, it was the start of a darker chapter. In 1992, Tilikum was transferred to SeaWorld Orlando, one of the largest marine parks in the world. There, he was given access to multiple pools, round-the-clock veterinary care, and a larger social environment. It was, by every technical measure, an upgrade from Sealand. But there was something deeper, something psychological, that had already shifted inside Tilikum. Years of confinement, bullying by the older females, sensory deprivation, and then the stimulation of Kelty's death had etched something irreversible into his behavior. Tilikum was no longer just a captive whale. He was a triggered one. At SeaWorld, his role was minimized. He didn't perform water work with trainers the way others did. His interactions were limited to simple behaviors at the pool's edge. Opening his mouth, rising up for visual impact, splashing the crowd. He was too large, too unpredictable, too dangerous. And yet, he remained a star attraction. In 1999, Tilikum was involved in the death of Daniel Dukes, a man who reportedly snuck into the SeaWorld pool area after hours and was later found draped over Tilikum's back the next morning, nude and lifeless. SeaWorld classified it as a trespassing accident, but questions remained. Why hadn't the whale let go? Why was the man's body found covered in injuries? And then came 2010. The name Dawn Brunchot would become forever linked to Tilikum's legacy. Dawn was a seasoned, beloved SeaWorld trainer. On February 24th, 2010, nearly 19 years to the day after Keltie Byrne's death, Dawn was pulled into the water by Tilikum during a post-show routine. What followed was graphic, violent, and witnessed by park guests. She did not survive. Today, Sealand is long gone. The pool where Kelty drowned has been drained, its edges eroded by time. But her story lingers in documentaries, advocacy campaigns, and conversations that continue to question the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. Tilikum died in 2017 after 25 years at SeaWorld. By then, the world knew his name, not as a performer, but as a symbol of what happens when you cage something that was never meant to be contained. Keltie Byrne was just 20 years old, a dreamer, a scholar, an athlete, a young woman who loved the ocean, loved orcas, and believed in a future where humans and nature could coexist. But the truth she didn't live to see is that some cages don't look like prisons. Some prisons have lights, applause, and smiles. And sometimes, they don't break the animal, they break everyone else. Was Keltie Byrne's death a tragic accident or an inevitable consequence of captivity? Orcas are not just animals, they're apex predators. But more than that, they're intelligent, social, and deeply emotional beings. In the wild, they swim over 100 miles in a single day. They hunt in coordinated family groups. They pass down culture, language, hunting techniques, even traditions. They form lifelong bonds. Now imagine all of that, compressed into 26 feet of concrete. The pool was small, the routines mind-numbingly repetitive. Food came in scraps, mental stimulation was almost non-existent, and the social structure broken. Tilikum, a young male, was bullied by 2 older females every day. There was no escape, no peace. So when Kelty fell in that day, the whales didn't see a trainer. They saw something new, something alive, something to interact with. Her death wasn't just a fluke. It was a message, a crack in the glossy image of marine parks. That message grew louder in 2013 when the documentary Blackfish reignited public outrage. It told Tilikum's full story, Kelty's included, and exposed the devastating effects of captivity on orcas. The world began to ask new questions. Why are we keeping the ocean's most powerful creatures in glorified bathtubs? Why are we training wild animals to dance for fish and applause? Why are we risking lives for entertainment? In the years since Kelty's death, the tide has turned. SeaWorld has ended orca breeding. Live shows are being phased out. Laws have changed. Minds have changed. And maybe that's her legacy. Keltie Byrne didn't die in vain. Her tragedy became a spark that helped the world remember. Some creatures were never meant to be caged. Keltie Byrne was just 20 years old, bright, passionate, full of life. She loved the ocean, and she loved the orcas who, in the end, would take her from this world. She didn't die from hatred or violence, but from misunderstanding. The whales didn't know what death meant, but they knew what captivity had taken from them. Kelty's final words, "I don't want to die," they still echo. Not in Sealand, it's gone, but in every debate, every protest, every quiet moment of reckoning that questions, what are we doing to these animals, and why? Kelty dreamed of saving marine life. In the end, maybe she did. What do you think? Should orcas be kept in captivity, or is it time to set them free? Like, if this story moved you, share to keep Kelty's story alive, and subscribe for more true, powerful survival stories like this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.